Ding ding. Oh, we've got everybody is so brilliantly attuned to the bell by now. This is great. I feel like I've just taken the job of the chief whip. Thank you for coming along to this session. What might intrigue people about the Conservative Party and polling right now? Well, we have a fantastic reveal for you this afternoon, and we are here with our friend from YouGov, the head of politics of YouGov's analytics and polling, Patrick English, sitting to my far right. Next to me is the reprehensible Sam Coates from Sky News, partner in crime throughout this week. And just a very quick preamble on polling to let the tension build up to the big reveal. I've always thought that one of the least true things ever said about politics is that the only poll that matters is on election day, because this is everyone who's involved in the business of politics or around it knows this is nonsense. Polling checks in on the mood, tests the mood, sometimes shapes the mood, and it most certainly, I think, drives the conversation at this conference, as it has done at the Labour conference last week, where Patrick was also with Sam and with me. It won't surprise you to know that we wanted to find out more about how Kemi Badenoch is doing. Might there be some one-on-ones who are hoping to replace her, and how do the members poll feel about that? And then the R word. So we're going to broadly go through the next half hour or so with those three questions in mind. So let me flip over to Sam to say, well, do you want to give us a drum roll and some big reveal?
So we promised to bring you the poll at 4 o'clock. It is now 4 o'clock. 50% of all the Conservative members that we polled via YouGov think that Kemi Badenoch should not lead the party into the next election. So 50% think that they want to replace her for the sake of the party by the next election. The YouGov poll of Tory members, which was taken in advance of this conference, found 46% think the current Tory leader should stay in place when the country goes to the next poll, but 50% say that she should not. Now, Tory members are also split on whether or not she will make it that far. 49% think she will be out before the election, compared to 47% who think that she will still be in place. So statistically, that's within the margin of error, but ever so slightly more people don't think she's going to make it. So more people don't think she should make it, and more people don't think that she's likely to make it. Patrick.
Yeah, and I think these are obviously very important results, very interesting results. And there's two little stories beneath those headline figures that I'd like to put out. Firstly, although party members, half of them think that Kemi Badenoch should be standing down, it's not the case that they think she's done a particularly bad job. By 61% to 37%, the members think that she's done actually quite well as leader of the party. Her favourability rating is quite good, 70% favourable to 29% unfavourable. A net score of 41 means that Kemi Badenoch is more popular with her own members than Keir Starmer is with his. That figure was net 33 for him. But the perhaps most telling part of this, and perhaps explains why the numbers are as we see them today, 30% of those who voted to put Kemi Badenoch in as leader just a year ago think that she should stand down before the election. So it's not particularly the case, let's say, that she's particularly unpopular, but it seems to us, that the membership just doesn't think that she's up to fighting an election.
Can I just ask you, having looked at a lot of leaders' ups and downs, choppy first years has been known, how bad or relative is this to trends that you've seen?
It is bad, and let's be honest, it's bad for Kemi and it's bad for Keir as well. They're really struggling at the minute, I think, to present a good case to their own membership, which is, quite a damning thing. And if we think back to Boris Johnson, it took so long for party members to turn against Boris Johnson and say that he should go, even at the height of ministers resigning, scandals coming out left, right, and centre. The members still stuck by him. And thinking back to the membership again with Labour, they're kind of already rowing in behind Andy Burnham over Keir. So I think it is bad, but it's bad for both leaders.
Can I just jump in before I flip over to Sam? That was kind of, well, my first impression was, is this much worse than Keir Starmer is doing with Labour? So I did ask you for that, and I think you said that the most comparable stat there would be...
The 37%. So almost 4 in 10 don't want Keir.
Don't want Keir.
So
to stand the next election.
To be the Labour leader the next election.
So that's a bit better.
A bit better, but still, imagine 40%, again, of the people who made you leader, who put you where you are as Prime Minister now believe that you should be standing down.
But materially, you think this is worse? I mean, it's kind of funny, isn't it? I don't know what maybe this is where you might like to pick up, like a few percentage points then. Well, like quite a lot of people think Keir shouldn't be around. A few more think Kemi shouldn't. Why is it optics, or why do you think it feels worse when you see those numbers coming in there for Kemi Badenoch?
I mean, 50% is just a psychological barrier as well as a statistical. It is now, we are now at the point where half the party thinks that she should not fight the next election.
A number's not just a number.
I think once it's got a 5 or more in it, it's a really big problem. And I do think it's fascinating you were saying about Kemi Badenoch, you know, people saying that they like her as leader more than they want her to stay as leader. It feels to me like that's almost a sort of sympathy vote or a pity vote. I like her, but really just she's not up to it. I feel almost uncomfortable at the
I've occasionally heard
process.
that tone from Sam Coates.
Psychologically uncomfortable sort of process that people are going through when answering that. But I mean, but I can't think of any other reason why you'd like her but want her to go, unless you sort of felt a bit guilty.
I think so, yeah. And I think it comes back. My sense is that they just don't think that she's up to an election. I think that's what this data is telling us. I think you're right. They like her. They don't think that she's a bad leader. They don't really think unfavourably towards her. But the signals seem to be that the Conservative Party membership think that they will be better served being led by somebody else to give them the best shot at the next general election. We
don't know, though, how they're responding to these welter of policy announcements that are coming thick and fast at this conference.
We don't. This poll was taken before this week. There will be Tory members' polls, by the way, don't happen very often because they're hard to do. Patrick would confirm that, but I can also confirm the consequence of them being hard to do is they're bloody expensive. They are like £10,000 plus, which is why you don't see them all the time. Why this is a special moment that you guys in this room are getting something worth a lot of money for free and free drinks. Who can possibly complain? But that means that, you know, the policies this week, including a 188-page document justifying the legal basis for leaving the UCHR, or the promise today of mega spending but also mega cuts, it's going to be a little time before it feeds through into whether or not there's been a positive impact for Tory members. Of course, every Tuesday morning, if you listen to Politics and Sam and Az, you'll get voting intention figures from Patrick. And so we will be able to track the wider public reaction to this conference. They've all been tuning in, haven't they?
Of course. But that's actually, apart from relentless self-promotion, which Sam and I are excellent at right now, it's not a bad idea, is it, to check in the next weeks if you're interested in this and just see how things have settled down, if they have at all, after the big Kemi-geddon event of this conference, or indeed, you know, did it turn out a bit like, they just wanted to hear something solid and now they've rallied?
Can I just say, I've just had a message from CCHQ. They're just going,
that was as well.
All they've said is a heads up would have been nice. I mean, less. I mean, no, obviously. You don't tell people. I mean, don't tell them that I've told you this. Please, let's keep it our secret. But like, I mean, just the hurt tone. Because I did say I had nothing left in the exclusive locker.
It's all going well, isn't it? Relations are going well.
Please, well, let's see if they let's call them PASPA.
Why did you just read out all your WhatsApps? That would actually, we'd have a great afternoon.
Yes,
no more contact.
And then I'll bow out of political life forever. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, shall we move to the hopefuls? Okay. Yes. Now, apparently, there's this guy. With my spell check, makes it always called Robert Generic. And Robert Generic, that seems to be the person everyone is watching. Sam Coates was pursuing him around yesterday and finally managed to sort of corner him. And if you look at the video, got the story out of him, he's Robert Generic literally in a corner. Is there a way out of this? But Robert Generic seems to be the man to watch. Is that what we actually found, or were we watching the wrong horse here?
Okay, let's go through the numbers. Robert Generic is now the person to watch in the Conservative Party. We asked if there was a head-to-head between Kemi Badenoch and Robert Generic. Remember, that was the contest just a year ago. How would you vote? And 46% of Tory members picked Robert Generic over 39% for Kemi Badenoch. Obviously, it was flipped last year. It's flipped over. 11% said neither, 4% don't know. Now, if you ask pretty much about anybody Robert Jenrick comes top. So Robert Jenrick right now would be Boris Johnson, James Cleverly, and Priti Patel. And interestingly, it's a hypothetical because this is never going to happen. The one little bit of good news for Kemi Badenoch is she'd actually beat Boris Johnson now, which is perhaps not something of popular myth. But look, right now, more Tory members want Robert Jenrick as leader than Kemi Badenoch, the person that they've got. Patrick.
Yeah, and what really sort of, perhaps not surprised me, really drew my intrigue about these head-to-head results and the sort of the long lists that we polled was the relative lack of demand or desire from Conservative Party members, or appetite, let's say, for the princes across the water rather than the prince in the tower, we might put it. So when Kemi Badenoch is put up against Johnson, Farage, even Truss, the members wouldn't prefer any of those over the current Conservative Party leader. So it seems to me they're not looking for somebody from the outside to come in and rescue the party. They believe that they will be best served by somebody already there. And that person is, as this polling shows, Robert Jenrick.
46-39, not comfortable for Kemi at all. Not absolutely sweeping there. So you might also want to tell us a bit about those, who's kind of got the silver and bronze in that prospective race, and like, what's the margin then?
Yeah, so there are, of course, other people that we've polled, and other people do quite well. So when we gave the sort of the long list outside of the head-to-head contests, Boris Johnson does come third in that, 22%. Interestingly, in basically a statistical tie, the sample size of this, which is 650, James Cleverly is right on the heels of Boris Johnson as well at 20%. So he still commands quite a lot of sympathy and quite a lot of support from the party membership.
You make that, Sam, because as you say, it is sizable. It makes absolutely clear you were chasing around after the right person this week, but there's certainly, there's still appetite for some choice as an alternative to Kemi Badenoch.
One of the lessons that I've learned through the last few years of Tory wars, and nobody does it better than the Tories, so it's I can see Tim nodding along there, is that you don't know the conclusion of a Tory leadership race at the start. That would be true when Liz Truss was elected. It was true when Rishi Sunak was elected as well. You didn't know on day one where you're going to end up at the final moment. So you just don't know until the terms of the contest become clear. Because I suspect, let's put your mind in the sort of theoretical environment of a Tory leadership contest with Robert Jenrick as the main contender. And the question that I think a lot of people are going to ask, like it or not, is, are you going to do a deal with reform? No spoilers, that's the next bit of the poll. But that's what I think the essay question would be in the poll, and how he responds to it, whether he responds to it like he did yesterday, where he said that's not my priority, or whether he responds to it in a more affirmative way, whether he decides that is a sell for Conservative members, hey, let's surrender our party to the other party, or whether or not he thinks or whether or not he thinks that he needs to be more sort of discreet, will determine the course of that race, and how somebody else kind of forges a different path from that will determine things. So there we go. So I was sort of mentally catching up because I worked out I could reply to CCHQ. I've been tweeting that this poll is coming all day, so I'm in the clear. Sorry, I'm doing two things at once. Anyway, it's not that we all do two things on stage at once, but there we go.
And so just to go through that field then. So if you're a Priti Patel, someone is a good point that you don't know what's going to happen. You're not all in a sort of transfer market of votes that you would end up with if this were the real thing. So is there anyone else that we should just be keeping an eye on who maybe could be playing a significant role, could be a sort of king or queen maker? And if you were, say, a Priti Patel, who gave us a very spirited interview here on stage yesterday, it's like, there's maybe this town is big enough for a few contenders who might still have some hopes. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. So looking through the favourability data, which is always a good sort of out of sort of contest guide of who might perform well, who might do well. And they all come up pretty positive, which is perhaps a surprise, but Conservative Party members seem to like Conservatives, which is, perhaps that's a headline. So obviously Kemi Badenoch has a net favourability of sort of the 41. Mel Stride has a similar number as well. so that could be one to keep an eye on. And Priti Patel does not fare so well. She's only at plus 20-ish. Chris Philp around about the same number. Jenrick is up at plus sort of 53. So he really is quite clear ahead on these net favourability numbers. Cleverly, he's doing well, 70 to 26. It's effectively a mirror of Kemi Badenoch. Jeremy Hunt still carries quite a lot of favourability. He's about as popular with his sort of party membership as Keir Starmer is with his as well, sort of around about that 35 mark. So there are lots of people who still carry a lot of favour with Conservative Party members.
So it depends, really now whether they want, right? So you take this, you describe the characters, and the scores are on the doors for them. So pacts with reform, deals, agreements, flirtations, or Gloria Gaynor, go walk out the door. Not welcome anymore.
Let's do this section of the poll. Right. So remember, Kemi Badenoch, to our Anne, absolutely clear, no pacts, no deals, nothing. And once you've said something to Anne, you can't row back on it. We're very clear
it's
about
constitutional.
That. Absolutely. This poll finds that 64% of Tory members support an electoral pact. And as defined in the poll, as meaning the Reform and the Tories shouldn't stand candidates against each other in target seats. So 64 pro-pact, 31 anti-pact. So that's a 2-to-1 margin. Like, that's massive. That's pretty defining. That's clear. 2-to-1 margin. That means the party's in favour of a pact. Remember, we had that leaked conversation with Robert Jenrick earlier in the year that he also seemed to suggest that you shouldn't have the parties of the right duking it out and therefore potentially putting Labour in number 10. Right, that's 2-to-1 for a pact. Now get this.
Really interesting.
Almost half of Tory members, 46%, would support a full-blown merger with Reform UK. This is kind of like the abolition of the Tory party. This is sort of, this is heading for no more brand Tory as a distinctive unit after, being the longest serving, the longest political party in existence in British political history. Get rid of that. 46% support full-blown merger against 48, obviously slightly more within the margin of error, who would oppose a merger, but still a huge number supporting effectively the end of the Tory party. Party members are very clear that in a hung parliament, right, this is really interesting, right? There's one thing that they would expect Tory MPs to do, right, which is to, under no circumstances, put a Labour Prime Minister back in number 10, right? Tory members oppose a coalition with Labour by 93 to 6.
I'd love to meet the 6% who couldn't wait to get it on with
in
Labour.
this room right now.
But 73% would welcome a coalition with Reform in a hung parliament, 25 against. But the point about that 93 to 6 is that there are only 6% of Tory members who think that keeping Nigel Farage out of number 10 is more important than keeping Labour out of number 10. And I think that tells you something about the complexion of the Tory party and its priorities, and that really, I think it does show that Kemi is fighting against the tide in an almost impossible way, because they don't want Labour, and they're a bit about, if the consequence of that is having Nigel in number 10, we'll make do with that. And I think that, to me, is 93 to 6. It's just, you don't often get polls like that.
You don't. It's very true. It's quite a clear, very clear message, really, from the membership on that. And there was, again, a little nugget beneath some of these overall figures which really caught my eye. So the idea of a merger, as the party is pretty much split on that. The membership, as we know them today, is split on this. But it seems to have become something of a wedge issue for the Brexit tribes within the Conservative Party. A lot of Conservative Party members voted to remain, obviously fewer than voted to leave, but there are a lot of Tory Remainers still in the party. Now, we found that 53% of those who voted to leave in the European Union referendum in 2016, who are Conservative Party members now, would support a merger with Reform. So that's quite a high number, but it's still maybe not as high as you'd think. But it's significantly higher than the 32% of Remainers who would support a merger with Reform. And that piqued my interest, because if we're thinking along these lines, if it comes to pacts, if it comes to mergers, could it be that the Leave-Remain dynamic becomes increasingly important within the Conservative Party membership as their future and questions about their future become more and more louder?
I had a question for you about this, the first 2 points of data here, Patrick. 64% support an electoral pact, 31% don't. And then, obviously, that number came down much closer to the sort of, not quite 50-50, but 46% supported a full-blown merger with reform, which, as Sam said, would be effectively was giving up the autonomy of what Kemi Badenoch this week always calls a 200-year-old party. Well, it wouldn't be for much longer, would it? With kind of Fortnum and Mason sort of agreement. But that distinction is an interesting one. Obviously, it's a lot easier to support some form of pact. You haven't said what you've sacrificed. You haven't sort of said, the old Soviet-era joke about the joint venture, who gets the ham and who gets the eggs. And, so it's a lot easier to sign up to that. And yet, certainly a substantial number of people did. Then, just a sort of slightly silly question. I hope you tolerate it. Are we clear that people sort of know what they're answering here? Yes. Or are they sort of, well, that sounds nice, because one always has an optimism bias that one's own side is going to, get the ham and the other guys may do the omelette.
I think that's a really, really important point to make about this. We didn't go into any level of detail exploring the terms of any potential merger. Quite exactly. A lot of these members may be answering positively, thinking that, yes, we're the largest parliamentary party, that in 2 years' time we'll be ahead in the polls. We can just absorb reform and everything will be happy and fine and dandy. So I think a lot of them probably are answering with that in mind, although a lot of them, I think, will probably be looking at this realistically and saying, look, if the vote on the right remains split, if there remain two competitive parties on the right of British politics, they only need to think what happened in 2024. There was an election which Labour won a landslide, putting on about 1% extra of the vote. And the reason why is because the Conservatives' vote scattered across the land, and a significant amount of it went to reform. And Labour stood still in many, many constituencies, or even went backwards and won because of the split of the vote on the right. So it could be, I think, as a balance probably between people saying, yes, it'll be great, we can absorb reform. Others might be looking at this more pragmatically and saying it will condemn us to decades of defeat if we don't unite the vote on the British political right.
That's right. And these are all, because of the current political environment, these are not conversations that you can have out loud at this conference. There is no conversation about what your leverage is if you do want to go and have a conversation with Nigel Farage's reform. And by the way, should you want to go and do that, Reform UK say no, because there is a very clear hierarchy in the polls at the moment. So there is not anything in Nigel Farage's interest to make this conversation any easier. And so the Conservative Party is in a bind. But if you think that you have the whip hand, I fear at the moment, with Nigel Farage in charge of reform, you are sorely mistaken. I do think the one big imponderable is if Nigel Farage ends up not running reform, something happens to him in terms of him detaching from the Reform Party and say Richard Tice taking over, then I think that would be a game changer. That would like spin the whirligig of British politics. Don't know what happened then, but as it stands, that's where we are. I think we're going to go to questions in just a moment. But Patrick, what do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I think that's entirely right. There are conversations that can't be had, which, to go back to the top of this segment, is the importance of polling, because we can have those conversations and we can ask the members, the people who probably would be a significant part in making these sorts of decisions, what they think about this. And I think it'd be great in future polling perhaps to test some of these scenarios and to go and ask them, would you be comfortable with a merger if it puts Farage in number 10? Or would you be comfortable with a merger if it's sort of like an Australian-style liberal national coalition? I think it'd be really good to explore these. Because as you both rightly say, it's not conversations that will be had in active politics, but the members will have a view.
The effect on the dynamics will be really interesting. As don't worry, we're going to throw it out to you guys. But I was just thinking when Robert Generic told Sam Coates it was not a priority to have any conversation. Well, it would appear for quite a lot of people it is. And also, he didn't rule out that it might be simply interesting for people to be thinking about that. And I think this is what this polling clearly shows, right? This wasn't a sort of go away, I haven't thought about this yet, what a silly question. It was people had a distinctive position, and I'm really interested, but the numbers were so solid. I'd maybe expected something a bit more disparate. Right.
Just before we throw open to questions, I described earlier Patrick as my favourite pollster. And now I've got a small amendment to make.
Oh,
because standing at the back of the room is my other favourite pollster. He's also turned up. Is Anthony Wells, also from YouGov. And between those two, they are the reason that we have high quality data in this country, that Sam and Anne is able to talk about brilliant polling produced by them that we rely on and believe and trust. And it's an incredible partnership. And we are very lucky to work with you as a partner. And so that's a pleasure. I just want to say thank you because the data is quite important. Right. Does anyone have any questions?
In the air and the microphone at the front.
There we go.
Sam, you interviewed someone after Mel Stride's speech, a Tory party member, who gave him a 5 out of 10, and then seemed quite aggrieved that you suggested that he might have to change jobs. Do you think there's a squeamishness amongst Tory members about sort of having a 12-month lifespan for leaders?
I mean, clearly, yes. And I mean, it was a fascinating insight into one person, but I'm interested in how widely had. So after Mel Stride's speech, Tory member, we interview him live on air, and I said, what do you think of the speech? He goes, 5 out of 10. I was like, oh, that bad? And he was like, well, you know, next year it could be a 6, and then the year after that it could be a 7. I was like, so do you want to get rid of Kemi Badenoch and Mel Stride? Oh, no. And, I don't know. I'm not sure my parents would have loved 5 out of 10 in all of my test scores. But, you know, some people... So maybe the answer to that is yes. But that's not what these numbers are telling us. I think, and here's I think the point. When you're thrust in front of a camera on Sky News going live, you perhaps occasionally temper what you might say compared to what you would say in private. And in the privacy of your computer when you're looking at YouGov sites, you give a different answer, maybe closer to your real view, which is also how you might vote in a party leadership process. The only qualification to that is that the next person I interviewed live on Sky News explained the lack of people in the seats listening to Mel Stride's speech as a result of the massive hangovers that everyone was experiencing after a mega night in the bar. And she said people's eyes were bleeding with their hangovers, which is why they weren't watching Mel Stride. So maybe it's not entirely true to say that people self-censor the entire time when they're live on Sky. I have to say both sets of answers surprised me.
Disarmingly frank. Just remind us how Mel Stride fared, because you mentioned him earlier. And after all, this is the Shadow Chancellor, as the biggest bully pulpit that you get in the opposition apart from the leaders. So you just give us a bit of insight there, please.
Yeah, can't open the phone now, but I think he was on about sort of plus 35, plus 40. So he does pretty well. He's nowhere near the generic level. He's sort of competing, I'd say, around about the same as Kemi. So again, and I think perhaps to quickly add a little qualification as well to the data here, we didn't ask, do you want to get rid of Kemi now? And I think that's important because, you know, asking about active regicide is different, and it's going to elect more conservative with a small c responses than do you think she should go sometime between now and the election? So I think the conversations around about, you know, should somebody go now? I think if we did ask that, we get a much lower number. But the important thing is, the important question is, should she be leader at the next election? And half the members, and half the members say no.
That's the futures market, isn't it? Which is, if you don't control that in politics, then what have you got? Is anyone else out there being a spark to a question?
By the way, just on Mel Stride, where you're working out whether or not to ask him the question, I do think that when he releases his unpublished novel that's been sitting gathering dust on his laptop, actually those favourability numbers.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not saying, but I mean, that could be the game changer.
Oh, very good. That's exciting.
By the way, I don't know.
The 11th thing you don't know about Mel Stride.
Anne doesn't know this yet, but I have entered into negotiation with Mel Stride. He is going to read for us, so we can put it on Politics of Sam and Anne's, the first paragraph of the book. And so hopefully that will come. If his spin doctor doesn't wimp out in the next few days, the Gathering Dust book on his laptop's first chapter, first paragraph is winging its way to us on a voice note anytime soon for all of your consumption.
Good reads with Mel Stride. I think we've given you a lot to take away there and mull on, and do keep following the polling that follows up from this, because I was certainly very intrigued to see whether all of this fun and all of the hangovers made any difference to what you revealed to us there, Patrick. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all.